Hello, everyone, and welcome to Torch Sports. We start with the Orange Zone crew. I'm your host, Jackson Chalk, alongside Sophie Starkey, Luke Cattell, and Luke Lamery. Let's jump right in. Now, the Volunteers took down the Kentucky Wildcats last Saturday in a game that might have had the longest first half of all time, or at least it felt like that. It was not entertaining. Regardless, let's take a look at the post-game stats to get an idea of how that game went. Now, this is the first time, at least that I can remember while we've been doing these, that Tennessee has won all four categories, which is a good sign, and we're heating up at the right time. Tennessee wins the game 26-18, which looks closer than I think it felt. Now, total yards, they win by a healthy margin, which is a very nice thing to see. As well as passing yards, they had 100 more yards. Again, very nice to see. Rushing yards, typically you see a little more rushing yards than what we saw in this afternoon, but I like to see the pass game kind of picking up where the rush game hasn't, because that seems like something that Tennessee hasn't necessarily done well. And then yards per play are about the same, but Tennessee gets the edge. Regardless, we need to talk about that first half, because that first half was ugly, and it felt like it lasted an eternity. Luke, how are we going to fix, or how is Coach Heupel and the offense going to fix this molasses slow offense that we see every first half since, I think, Alabama or Florida?
Yeah, absolutely. Heupel needs to realize that what's happening in the first half isn't working. And what you got to do, you look at it like a car battery. You got to jump it. You got to get something going. And so you go out there with the mentality that you got to stun your opponent. It's not, working from run to pass. I feel like people get so obsessed with, is he going to run it or is he going to pass it? You got to come out there with something different. Maybe a couple of trick plays. I hate the mentality that trick plays are cowardly coaching. You go out there and maybe run a couple of trick plays, get your guys confident they can get some yards, go out there and put some points up, and you know what? Sure, you can look at Max Gilbert and say he didn't perform well. We would have had the lead going into the half. But at the end of the day, that offense was not producing to the level that they should have, and you got to go with some different plays first half. Sure, second half playbook looks fine. First half, mix it up a little bit. There's no shame in that. There's no shame in running trick plays, and there's no shame in going out there with a different mindset, a different set of, different set of plays first half.
You say trick plays. What kind of trick plays do you want to see? Draw me up the first trick play you want to see.
Let's do this. Let's go. Nico takes it. He's going to pass it back. Let's go Brew McCoy. Brew McCoy takes it. Brew McCoy's been working in practice. He's been working on throwing the football. Kitzelman can catch. Okay, let's throw Kitzelman down. He's running a little post towards the opposite side of the field, and so Brew McCoy throws that thing all the way down. Kitzelman's got beautiful hands, soft hands. He brings it in for a trick play. That's a lot of yardage right there, and he put him in field goal range.
Okay, I like it.
To play devil's advocate against you real quick here. Now, trick plays are great, except when they don't work. And do you think part of the reason that we're not seeing maybe some trick plays from some of these college football teams is because you get a lot of heat if they don't go your way?
Yeah, but I feel like in the same way you look at it, right now it's justified because nothing's working. There's not a lot that's working first half. Sure, you get a couple of good plays going, and then all of a sudden you stall. When you stall, you bring it out. And so there's a justification line to that point, and I get it. Maybe you don't go out there first play and run one, but if there's something that's not working, you go out there, it's justified at a certain point.
Okay, now let's move on. Despite the offense's miserable start, kind of off the gun, it seemed like Nico did play fantastic.
Yes.
Talk about what happened there.
Absolutely. So, per usual that we've seen so far, took him a minute to find his rhythm, but once he did, this was the best SEC performance by Nico that we have seen so far this season. Maybe with Oklahoma in there, but he kind of had that downward spiral, and now we're seeing him complete these passes, having a game and career highs that he has not reached so far this season. He was 28 of 38 passes, and that is a career high for him. He was 292 yards, 1 touchdown pass, and he threw to 9 different players who caught passes. So he is utilizing different offensive weapons, which means he's not just favoring Brew or Kitzelman, which both had great games. He's really being dynamic with who he throws it to. And if we can play on those strengths and who is catching passes, that's definitely going to make us more dangerous, hopefully earlier on in the season. So if we can just move everything he did about 2 quarters up, we're going to see some improvement. But very proud of him. I hope he brings the heat for Mississippi State.
And mind you, this is the first 200-plus yard passing performance we've seen from Nico since NC State.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. So this was a really good game for him to kind of get his feet under him and hopefully get some confidence going.
And most of the errors, I will say, I'll play devil's advocate, weren't necessarily his fault. We had several drop passes, but just seeing him hit his targets was definitely a confidence booster for me, and I think for him, knowing that this is how I should be performing quarter one. So.
Sure. Right. I think after the Florida game, after the Alabama game, he's finally kind of settled into the kneeling. Not that he wasn't used to a kneeling effect, but regardless, it's your blood is kind of jumping when you get in there. Absolutely, and I think he's finally hit that level of tranquility where he can settle down.
Comfortable.
Now, if he's going to be able to do that in Georgia, Only time will tell. But let's not worry about that yet. Let's go to Mississippi State. Luke, you did a little bit of a scouting report. Tell us about it.
I did. So this Mississippi State team they're hopping on the latest college football trend of this 2-quarterback system that you're seeing from a lot of these teams.
Something the Orange Zone is not a fan of.
Exactly, but it's working for them. Their 2 quarterbacks that they use have combined for 2,200 yards on the season, 17 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. That's not a bad stat line from your top 2 quarterbacks. And they throw them in pretty frequently. The split's pretty even between the 2 quarterbacks, and it's working for them. But what I'm looking at for this Mississippi State team is the defense. Now, this defense is not nearly as good as this offense is. This offense is putting up points. They're kind of middle of the pack for SEC stats. But you look at these defense. I'm going to read you off some stats, and I want your take on these.
Yeah, read those stats.
Defense, worst in yards allowed per game in the SEC at 461 per game.
Not good.
Worst points allowed in the SEC.
How many?
461.8 per game.
That's not good.
Game.
That's terrible.
Worst points allowed in the SEC at 34.6 points per game. Worst rushing yards allowed in the SEC at 211.7 points per game. And the only 2 stats that they aren't the worst in the SEC are, they're second to worst, which is total passing yards allowed and total passing yards allowed per game. So this Mississippi State defense is not good. And against a hopefully high-powered Tennessee offense that we saw in the second half, I'm hoping we exploit that pretty heavily because they have not been living up to the standard that you would expect at Mississippi State this year.
I think you sugarcoated the defense as saying not good. They are statistically the worst. They are the worst. And they're terrible.
The best part about that yards allowed per game, the 461.8, that's the worst in the SEC by 74 yards. So
It's not even close.
they're not doing too hot over there.
Well, we wish the Vols the best of luck. But for now, we're going to take kind of a broad look at college football as a whole. Let's take a look at the rankings that came out this Tuesday from the selection committee, the first of the season. We've only got 4 more left, so let's take a peek here. Now, Oregon came in at 1, no surprise. Ohio State, Georgia flipped from the AP poll 2 and 3 respectively, and then Miami, Texas, Penn State, Tennessee, Indiana, BYU, Notre Dame at 10, Alabama, Boise State. They are in the playoffs that they started today. SMU, Texas A&M would be the first 2 teams out. And under this scenario, Tennessee would host a playoff game against Indiana. What do you guys think of that matchup? Briefly before we get into it. You like those odds?
Scary against Indiana.
You don't like that at home?
At home is fantastic. I'm so happy.
I think it's a good game,
Indiana's
but not
a
easy.
tough team.
No.
Tough team to play this year.
Okay, now Sophie, talk us a little bit about Indiana and what you kind of saw as you looked at them.
Yeah, so looking at the 6, 7, 8 window here, we've got Penn State, us, yay, and then and then Indiana. I'm actually happy where we are, but if I'm Indiana, I'm asking questions about where we are right now because Penn State and Indiana are the 3 and 4 Big 10 teams, looking at that ranking. Looking at the college football power ranking, based just off of strength of schedule, Penn State is behind Indiana. Indiana is also undefeated, and Penn State is 7 and 1. Penn State really had only kind of 2 major challenges here. They played USC, took them down to the wire, lost at home to Ohio State. I'm asking questions if I'm Indiana because I think they absolutely should have taken that number 6 spot.
You don't think that's an issue considering, I mean, people have been saying that they have one of the worst strength of schedules kind of coming into this. You don't see that as that way?
Not necessarily because, especially just looking at them in Penn State, I really think Penn State had those 2 challenges, one of which they lost. It's neck and neck between them. Both top 10 teams for sure, but I don't know. College football power ranking, I'm quoting them, don't quote me, but they are 10 and Penn State's 11. So I'd be a little upset if I was Indiana at the moment.
Okay, stats don't lie. Stats don't lie. Let's move on to what I call the SEC suburbs. Now, these are the teams that are kind of in the mix, but they're still kind of a little bit away. They're definitely commuting in if they want to get into the college football playoff. Luke, what did you see from that element?
Yeah, I wish we could break down all of them, but I'll take a look at 3 right now. Number 1, our arch rival. Let's look at Bama. So, what do they need? Right now, they need to win out. They should have a spot if they can win out, but they don't exactly have the easiest outlook right now. Really, none of these teams, in all that matter, do. But we can look at, they play LSU. LSU, that's kind of do or die. I'll read you a stat. Chances increase for the playoffs with the win, 79% if they win. If they lose, they drop 15. So it's a do or die in LSU. Then you go play Mercer. Going to be killing. Okay, they're not going to do a whole lot there against Mercer. And then you go Oklahoma. That one, a little bit here and there, but LSU is do or die for Bama. You look at A&M. Take a look at Texas A&M here. They need to win out desperately, and that's a tough task. New Mexico State, Auburn, easy. Then you play number 5 Texas. That's where it boils down to right there. That's the big one. And sure, if you can beat Texas, have that at Texas A&M. Get in the playoffs. But I mean that's a tall order. Ole Miss. I don't really. It's going to be a tough one, Ole Miss. It's going to be a tough one for sure. It means beating Georgia. this week. And then after that, you look at Florida, Mississippi, SEC for the rest of it. And if you beat Georgia, I mean, have at it, but it's Georgia. So good luck, Ole Miss.
All right, well, when it comes to Ohio State, Oregon, that's what I kind of want to specifically talk about briefly. I want to commend the College Football Playoff Committee for putting Ohio State over, did I say Oregon? I meant to say Ohio State, Georgia. Let's backtrack a little bit. I want to commend Ohio State from going over Georgia because I think that they've had a more impressive schedule leading up to this. Georgia lost to what looks like an awful team now, and that is Alabama. Regardless, Alabama can still make the playoffs if we figure out different scenarios. Regardless, I'm happy that Ohio State jumped Georgia. I think that's the right move, but I'll have to see kind of as they play, Indiana, as they play Michigan, which is sure this year not the most competitive game, but it's still Michigan, Ohio State. You never know what could happen when it comes to that game. I'm interested to see where things lie, but I want to commend the College Football Playoff Committee for making that selection. I think it's the right choice. To wrap up, I know that there's a team that you are not fond of. Let's talk about them.
Yeah, I'm not very fond of the Missouri Tigers, and I'm going to keep this brief. On paper, they're not a bad football team. They're middle of the pack SEC. They're doing all right this year, but compared to last year, it's a complete downgrade for the Missouri Tigers. And you look at these games. Congrats, you beat Boston College, who was ranked when you beat them. You beat Vandy in overtime. You beat Auburn. Goody. Then you lost to number 25 ranked Texas A&M by 31, lost to number 15 ranked Alabama by 34. So I'm just not impressed by how the Missouri Tigers are playing ranked opponents this year, and I honestly don't think they should be in the college football playoff rankings as of right now. They're listed at 24. I don't think they deserve that spot.
I will say the only benefit to them still being ranked is that they had a ranked loss. Or I guess basically, since they're still ranked, it makes Tennessee look better, and Alabama beat a ranked team, which makes us look better. Whatever. College football playoffs is confusing. Fortunately, in the next section of Orange Zone, we found a little way to simplify it and showing you maybe who you want to root for the rest of the year. Regardless, we're going to show you it there, so stay with us. We'll see you on the other side.
So you want to put this outside, so you put it right there, and then
Be right there. Wait. Use the shovel and bucket of water, remember? Drown, stir, drown, feel. Then make sure it's cool.
Where'd you learn that?
SmokeyBear.com. Brushed up on some tips before we left. Don't want to start a wildfire, right?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
We are the Tennessee Volunteers. People who create connections, push boundaries, do the research that changes lives. We've got world-class academics and championship athletics. To be the best, you gotta learn from the best. And if you wanna lead, you gotta light the way. We've got what it takes. It takes a volunteer.
ready to go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Stayed up.
Welcome back to Rocky Talk, everyone. I'm your host, Zach Pelfrey, alongside my co-anchors, Jack Glennon and Alex Carpenter. Now, let's dive in. The NFL's Monday night game between the Chiefs and the Bucs ended in a way we've all seen before. The Chiefs won the coin toss in overtime, went down the field, scored on the opening drive, won the game to improve their record to 8-0. Now, just before overtime, let's go back to this clip right here. As you see, coin toss being called, lands in the Chiefs' favor, and look at Baker Mayfield right here, just in utter distraught because he knows what happens. We've seen this story too many times. Now, with that, the NFL's overtime rules have been taking a lot of heat recently. Jack, do they need to stay the same, or do they need to change?
Well, you know, for me, I think that Baker's reaction is all of our reaction, honestly. It's getting unacceptable at this point. It really is unacceptable. If they change the rule for the playoffs, they admitted that this rule is outdated. Because, first of all, in today's NFL, you got teams scoring on average last season 21.8 points per game. In 1993, where the defense was at its highest with Reggie White and players like that, 18.7 points per game. And so what this does, this overtime rule, is it puts so much pressure on your defense to succeed. And in a league where the officials today make it where you basically cannot play proper defense with the new hip drop tackle rules and all these penalties they get for touching the passer, especially Mahomes, okay? So when you look at this, and when you look at the league making it impossible to play defense, it's clear that this rule is completely outdated, it's unacceptable, and they have to change it where both teams get a fair shot to score the ball.
I understand that football is a very physical game. It's a hard-nosed football game, and it stinks to see a game come down to just a simple coin toss. But at the end of the day, you play 60 minutes divided into 15-minute quarters to determine a winner. And if you can't find a winner, you go into a 10-minute overtime. In the regular season, you've got to preserve your bodies, even if it comes down to a potentially harmful coin toss that decides the season. Back in 2022, when this rule was changed because of the Mahomes versus another great team, Josh Allen and his Bills, when Mahomes won that coin toss like we saw in the video, the voters on the off-season committee, they voted in a 29-3 vote to change the rules for overtime. So the voters took action and changed the rules for the playoffs. So they understand that this is an issue, and they wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to happen in key pivotal games. So my thing is, if the rule was going to change, then they would have changed it already, and I think that they should just leave it as is because the owners are understandable of this rule.
I think every game's a key pivotal game, though, especially for a team like the Bucs who's hunting for the wild card. You know, you got teams like the Colts, the Chargers, the Broncos. Every game means something to them when they're fighting for a playoff spot. Only 41% of teams that have lost the coin toss in overtime have gone on to win the game. That's too big of a split for me to think it's fair.
At the end of the day, though, if your defense couldn't get a stop at any pivotal points throughout that game, because we can look at it through the different stages of the game. A third down conversion in the first quarter is just as important as a third down conversion in the overtime period. If you can't get it done early, then did you really deserve a chance late?
Yes. The answer is yes. Everyone deserves. You deserve a fair chance to get the ball in overtime. I think the rule's ridiculous. They need to change it because if they change it for the playoffs, they've admitted that it's outdated and that it's unfair. So I think in the regular season it should still apply.
I think whichever way it swings, somebody's going to be upset.
Absolutely.
We've seen it more towards that side, though, where they're upset because they lose in overtime. But, you know, speaking of good teams, let's go to the bad teams. On your screen right now, you'll see the five teams with the worst record in the NFL. Oof. Panthers, Raiders, Patriots, Saints, and Titans. Now, at the midway point of the season, do any of these teams really have a chance to make it to the playoffs, to squeak it in, or should they just cut their losses and rebuild?
I got to tell you, out of those 2 wins teams, it's kind of crazy how many teams are in troubled water this year. There are 9 teams across the 32-man league that only have 2 wins. That is an insane stat, and it feels a little bit more than normal. In the 3-win league, there's 2 teams, the Cowboys and the Jets. Now, the Cowboys just lost Dak Prescott to an injury for an unforeseen amount of time, which is probably going to hurt their playoff chances, but I'll never bet against Aaron Rodgers and the Jets to make a run late. But out of those 2-win teams, I just think that some of them are just flat out bad. They're already rebuilding. The Panthers, the Raiders, the Saints, they probably went into this season with not as high of expectations, but in that next level you have teams like the Titans, the Jaguars, or the Cleveland Browns. Those are teams that maybe went into this season with a little bit of a glimmer of hope for a progression of their team, such as with Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, or with Deshaun Watson taking the reins of a Joe Flacco playoff team. The Cleveland Browns were a playoff team just a few months ago. And then, of course, the Titans hiring a new coach, bringing in key offseason additions such as L'Jarius Sneed or a guy like Calvin Ridley from the Jags. I just think that these are teams that need to commit to the rebuild now because it's not getting any prettier for the rest of the season.
Yeah, and could we, for 1 second, can we pull back up that graphic just to see all those teams? Because you look on the graphic and you see the teams. I mean, you have the Saints, the Titans. I mean, they had promise last year. The Titans had very promise with getting Will Levis, and the Saints. I mean, right here, the Saints started 2-0 and now have lost 7 straight.
Yeah.
The Patriots are just in an endless rebuild, and like I said, the Titans. I mean, they looked promising, and with the Raiders, I mean, you had Devontae Adams, you had Gardner Minshew, who again isn't like the starting quarterback, but you thought he could get the job done, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, I'll disagree with Alex in the sense that I think the Raiders absolutely came into the season with playoff expectations. You still have Devontae Adams, right? You cut ties with Josh Jacobs, but he's getting up there in age, and we see that he's still playing effective, so that was a horrible decision. But Gardner Minshew was one drop away from being a playoff quarterback last season. They were one play away, and he came in for the Colts, and he played really, really well when Anthony Richardson got hurt, and I think they could use Gardner Minshew right now. But even so, they were 8-9 with Aiden O'Connell last year. I think they were going to poised to do a lot better with Gardner Minshew, but now it's a dumpster fire in Las Vegas, and I think the only redeeming quality of this team is named Brock Bowers. I mean, he's phenomenal. We saw him at Georgia. He's a great player. But apart from that, for me, the blueprint for the Las Vegas Raiders is you have to fire Antonio Pierce. I love that he embodies the Raider spirit, right? He is a Raider. But that's, you got to fire him and bring in someone like Mike Vrabel who really brings in that toughness, you know?
Now let's transition over to the NBA for a minute. Now, we're 3 weeks into the season and right on the cusp of the NBA Emirates Cup, which is that in-season tournament that they added last year. Now, let's talk the Warriors. I mean, talk about back from the dead. They're in the conversation, 7-1 right now, and they lost probably their most key player in Klay Thompson, but it looks like they just got another one back in Buddy Hield. Now, he's been shooting lights out for the Warriors. Is Buddy Hield better for the Warriors than Klay Thompson was?
Absolutely not, and I'll tell you why. Because Buddy Hield, yeah, he's shooting 51% from three. That's insane. However, not sustainable at all. You know, really struggled with Philadelphia late last season. Played one great game in the playoffs, but I don't think 51% from three is sustainable for anyone. Not Klay Thompson, not Buddy Hield, not Steph Curry even. Klay Thompson and Steph Curry played 666 games together, so you know he's going to miss that chemistry in Golden State, and I think it's a big-time loss for them.
I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that Buddy Hield is better than Klay Thompson, but if you look at the season right now, Buddy Hield is shooting over 50% from three. That is an insane statistic and something that is happening because Buddy Hield has never had a coach like Steve Kerr. He has never had someone design an offensive scheme around you to where he's getting these open shots. He's coming off of screens, pick and popping like we saw with Dalton Connect last year on the Tennessee Volunteers. I want to read you the stat, is that he's hit 40% of his threes prior to joining Golden State. Now it's exploded up to 50%, and it's because of the quality of shots. He's sliding into Klay Thompson's role that he built for Klay Thompson. So honestly, he is succeeding because of Klay Thompson.
I think the Warriors just have like the perfect guy. Like they could not have found anybody better to take Klay Thompson's spot. Right. Now again, they don't have the chemistry yet, but that's going to come. Now, I think the biggest debate in the NBA right now, if you're asking me, and sorry, Caitlin Gill, if you're listening, you might want to turn away. The Milwaukee Bucks are 1-6. They fired their head coach last year and got Doc Rivers, who was supposed to be, the saving grace for the Bucks, and they haven't won. Their win-loss ratio is way down. Now, is Doc Rivers to blame for the Bucks losing?
He absolutely is, and I'll tell you why again, because there's only been 13 blown 3-1 leads in NBA playoff history, and Doc Rivers has 3 of them by himself. Okay, he can't get it done. He won 1 championship with a stacked Boston team, one of the most stacked teams we've ever seen in the NBA. He blew a 3-2 lead with Philadelphia a couple years ago against Boston, and he just can't get it done. He's got Giannis and Dame, and if he can't get it done with them, it's over.
I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that Doc Rivers is not 100% to blame for this absolutely abysmal start. It's unreal to see what the team has turned into in the short time that he's been there. But look, he's working without Chris Middleton. All he has on this team is Lillard and Giannis. He has Taurean Prince as a starter, and he has not averaged over 10 points since the 2020-2021 season. That is an insane person to have on your team and someone who should not be an NFL or NBA starter.
Well, it's a good thing there's 82 games in an NBA season, so we're far from over. But we'll have to stick with. We'll have to see what's going to happen. But that's all for today for Rocky Talk. Stay tuned because more Torch Sports is on the way.
Whether it's our stories, the warmth of our laugh, or our family's secret sauce, we all bring something different to the table. So make some space. The power of connection is waiting right outside your comfort zone. Learn how you can help strengthen your community at belongingbeginswithus.org/teamup.
Be right there. Wait. Use the shovel and bucket of water, remember? Drown, stir, drown, feel. Then make sure it's cool.
Where'd you learn that?
SmokeyBear.com. Brushed up on some tips before we left. Don't want to start a wildfire, right?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
We are the Tennessee Volunteers. People who create connections, push boundaries, do the research that changes lives. We've got world-class academics and championship athletics. To be the best, you gotta learn from the best. And if you wanna lead, you gotta light the way. We've got what it takes. It takes a volunteer.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another segment of The Summit. I'm your host, Jordan Smitherman, alongside Patrick Falcon, Jeremy Knopf, and back from retirement, Riley Haltom. And today, we're doing a segment all dedicated to hoops as it's finally basketball season. The men tipped off on Monday night against Gardner-Webb, while the Lady Vols tipped off Tuesday night against Samford. There's excitement surrounding both teams as the Vols just came off their best season yet. And even though there's no more Dalton Connect, sadly, there's a fresh squad ready to keep the momentum going in Rick Barnes' 10th year. So, speaking of basketball, speaking of the new group, no Dalton Connect, and thinking about what it was like before him, it was just, it's just like we need that one shooter. We were so good at defense, so good at all of this, but we just couldn't get enough offense. And then Dalton Connect was our savior, did that for us. But now, do we think this year will be the same story as the other years of great defense and a lack of shooting or offensive firepower, or do you think Rick Barnes has enough talent in this squad?
Yeah, right now I'm not seeing anybody on this squad that can step up to a Dalton Connect-like level. That said, this team has always lived and died by its defense.
Yeah.
That's how Rick Barnes teams work. That's how it's always going to be with Rick Barnes.
Yes.
That's not going to change. It was the same way last year. They won games that they played good defense in, and when they did not play their very best defense, that ended up being a loss. So I think you can absolutely expect more of the same defense, hence why a guy like, Jemai Meshack continues to get looks in the starting lineup. It's because of his defense, not for his offense, pretty obviously. So unless a guy like Chaz Lanier can, be more consistent shooting the basketball which we did not see very much of in the exhibition game against Indiana. He did improve in the first regular season game against Gardner-Webb. He can be a little more consistent. I think the Vols have something going there. And Jordan Gainey, shout out to him, man. He has been very consistent so far this season in both the exhibition and the regular season game. Look out for Jordan Gainey. He's got a chance to really step it up this season.
What about you, Patrick?
Yeah, I think it's going to be more offense. I think what we're seeing right now is kind of a conglomerate of transfers coming in, and the chemistry is just a little bit off. You know, it's going to take a few games to get going. It even took DK a few games to get going, so I'm not too worried about it, but I do think Lanier is going to have to be that guy and step up as the #1 scorer. Every team needs a #1 scorer. You need a bucket. Who are you giving the rock to? Ours has to be Lanier. I think Ziegler's a better all-around player. He's going to be a good facilitator. He's going to be great on defense, him and Shaq holding that down. But I think Lanier needs to be the firepower on offense. He had 18 versus Gardner-Webb. He looked good. I think once his chemistry improves and we get him going, this offense takes that jump to the next level.
Because he's a natural-born shooter, and he said in a quote, like, last week or something that, like, oh, like, my confidence isn't shot. Like, shooters are just going to shoot after the exhibition game. So I think the more games we get him involved, the greater he'll become. So I agree with you. What about you, Jeremy?
Well, as you mentioned, obviously losing Dalton Knecht was a big blow to that team, and we do wish him the very best in his NBA career with the Los Angeles Lakers. However, I am very confident in what Rick Barnes is doing with adding some offensive weaponry to that roster, and we've already mentioned the big one, Chaz Lanier, who absolutely lit it up in that first game on Monday night in the Food City Center. Put up some huge numbers, and it doesn't even stop there. You look at guys like Meshack. You had Jordan Gainey, Zakai Ziegler. They all had a great night. And sure, they went off to a rocky start, but doesn't everybody with first game jitters? They did take care of business, although, and made those running Bulldogs run all the way back home. Great game to start off the year, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what this season has in store. Hopefully we see the Big Orange put up some more big offensive numbers this year.
Yes, I like what everyone has to say. So in the past 2 games, we've seen rim protection and aggression kind of be a little bit of an issue. Not a huge one, but something to point out and something to notice. And our 2 main rim protectors are said to be big man transfer from Ohio State, Felix Okpara, and JP Estrella. So who do you guys think is going to have a bigger year? Like, granted, they both have little injuries right now, but if you could say, who do you think could have the bigger year?
Yeah, I'm still going to lean Okpara. He's getting that nod in the starting lineup for a reason, and obviously JP Estrella is still coming off of an injury that he's been working through for a while now. I have full confidence in Okpara to finally get it going, though. Rick Barnes, after that loss in the exhibition game to Indiana, said straight up, we did not get the ball inside enough, and they really didn't do it much better in that second game, or in their first regular season game against Gardner-Webb. They've got to get the ball inside, got to feed it into the paint, get some more reliable points so that you're not having Chaz Lanier shooting, 12 threes a game. That will certainly help your offense be a little bit more consistent. Need to see some more out of Felix Okpara, get him the rock inside. He'll do what he does defensively. He did when he was at Ohio State. He'll continue to do it here. Just need to see a little bit more aggression offensively from Felix Okpara.
And that'll come with more games. Like we've said, once we gel more, everyone will get in their groove, what spot they need to be in the floor and stuff.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Okpara there. Once again, he's a starter for a reason. I mean, the defense will come. He averaged, I believe, 2.4 blocks per game last year. He had 1 in the Gardner-Webb game. That's going to come along. I'm not really worried about that. And once we start to get the ball inside more, it's just, again, that chemistry. With chemistry comes less hesitancy. So once we get that, those post passes are going to be cleaner. We're going to give him better looks. He's going to be able to be more physical, play the game he wants to play, not be kind of scared, but kind of just slow out there. I think once we get him going a little bit, then he'll get more comfortable. He'll get more aggressive. And it's going to be a scary sight to see for opposing defenses.
Yes. What about you, Jeremy? What do you got to say?
I'm going to piggyback off of what Riley and Patrick said. I'm going to go with Felix Okpara, who is kind of like Chaz Lanier. He's in a similar situation. He's a transfer student. He's coming into a completely new school, conference, city, just a completely new environment or culture in college basketball. In his first game as a volunteer, he's a beast. He's a natural. He put up some big numbers on defense, 3 turnovers, 5 defensive rebounds as well. He's just a scary guy, and not to mention his size, folks. He's 6'11", 235 pounds as a junior. The guy is 1 whole foot taller than me.
Wow.
He is not a guy that I would want to face off 1-on-1 on the basketball court. He is a scary good player.
Yeah, I don't see where the love or the hate is for JP Estrella, but I think he's poised to have a big year too. Maybe a little less than Okpara, but I'm surprised you all said Okpara.
I think he's going to be great off the bench, but Right now, Akpar is more experienced. There's a reason he's in the starting lineup.
True.
Yeah, he'll get his
JP
minutes,
did
for sure.
Of course,
do the
of course.
best out of all three against Zach Edey in
true.
the Purdue game.
That is
So
true.
that's why I
It's
thought
true.
one of y'all would say that. So
Maybe so. Maybe
Yeah.
so. We'll see.
yeah. But moving on, we've already talked about the Lady Vols a little and the hype surrounding them, but Kim Caldwell is here and ready to take these Lady Vols back to the elite level they belong. So speaking of Lady Vols, do we think they have the potential to steamroll their opponents up until SEC play, or do we think there'll be some bumps in the road with all the new adjustments of a new coach and a new roster?
Yeah, if you know me, you know I can go on and on about these Lady Vols. One of my favorite teams to watch on campus. But, man, they are in a completely new system, a new era is the best way to put it. Kim Caldwell is the first head coach, the fourth head coach in Lady Vol history ever, and the first one that is not either Pat Summitt or somebody who played for Pat Summitt.
Yes.
So obviously a very different style of basketball these Lady Vols are going to be playing. It's fast-paced, high-flying,
Fast and
aggressive
furious.
defense, very aggressive defense, which I love to see. This team is going to be scary. They had 27 steals in this first game, which is tied for third ever in Lady Vol history, third most in Lady Vol history, in her first game. Also scored over 100 points for the first time since 2008, the Lady Vols did. This is a big, big moment for Lady Vol basketball, bringing them into the present day of women's basketball. I can't wait for it. This team is going to steamroll through their non-conference schedule, because that's another thing that's changed. Kelly Harper liked to schedule a lot of very, very tough non-conference opponents. Non-conference schedule this year, a little bit easier. They should be able to steamroll through there, maybe drop one or two just on a bad shooting night or something like that. But once it gets to SEC play, that's where the ante really steps up. They've got to really lock in for those.
Yeah, I think this team's doing great, but I think it's a little bit crazy to say we're not going to hit some road bumps in the non-conference schedule.
True.
We played a team that was in the national championship last year in Iowa. I understand they're not as good as they were last year, but you still got that coaching, still got that culture. They know how to win. The one I'm really worried about is preseason number 19 at Florida State. Now, we play them at home. We also play Iowa at home, so that helps. But they returned their 3 leading scorers, including 2 all-ACC players. Their offense was the best in the ACC last year. But I think, like you said, those 27 steals, we're pressing up well. We have that depth. We're rotating every minute and a half. We have that depth to do so. We're going to be able to pressure them a lot, slow that down. They can't stop anything on the defensive end. They were last in the ACC last year in total defense. I think we're going to continue to expose them when we play them. I think we're going to continue to shoot well, and I think we're going to take the ball away from them and not let that high-flying offense do as well.
Yes. And back to your 100 points, like whatever you said about that, Kim Caldwell said in an interview like that's going to be the goal for each game. And if we do that each game, gain all those steals, I think it's going to be hard to stop them.
Absolutely.
What you got, Jeremy?
Well, so first of all, that was a huge performance to start off the season. Definitely what you want to see out of the Lady Vols. But Riley, I will say in the words of Lee Corso, not so fast, my friend. I will say it will take some time for this team to really get the ball rolling. And if I was their head coach, I would just say take it one game at a time. And this non-conference stretch to start the year, that's the perfect time to do that, because before SEC play, when the season really matters, that gives you the time to figure out your team identity. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And so on. So let's just take 2021, for example. 12 non-conference games to start off the year. They started 11-1 in that stretch. Great start. 2022, they started 8-6. 2023, 7-5. So there's been some decline over the years. And will this team encounter some bumps down the road? Sure, with the new coaching staff and the new players coming in via recruiting or transfer portal. However, that does allow the opportunity to build team chemistry. So if this team is able to mesh together the way that Coach Caldwell wants them to, then they will be a very fun team to watch in the SEC, and they'll be more than prepared to stand up to any challenge that's in front of them.
Yes. And speaking of a new era, like I saw something on Twitter where it's like if they didn't make they made like Sarah Puckett shoot like 1,000 threes a day or something.
Chucking it.
Yes.
They didn't make her.
Or,
She chose
yes,
to.
That. Okay, yes. Good. I was wrong about that. But then she was like making them like run up and downs, like across the courts, like, and it was just like I saw all these comments and it was like, oh, like Pat Summitt's going to be smiling down from heaven. Like, oh, Pat Summitt's so proud. And it's just like, I don't know. I feel like they chose the right coach. And it's just like, we didn't have this culture back with Kelly Harper. Like, she was great, but it just wasn't as like, I don't know.
Intense.
As like
she brings
intense.
that. She brings that intensity. That is for sure. I love
and it's
that
what we
about
need
her.
to get back to the elite level we belong. So I just think it's going to be a new era, exciting, 100 points, lots of steals, aggressive basketball. It'll be fun to watch. But that is all we have for you guys today on the Summit. Thank you guys for tuning in, and go Vols.
The warmth of our laugh, or our family's secret sauce. We all bring something different to the table. So make some space. The power of connection is waiting right outside your comfort zone. Learn how you can help strengthen your community at belongingbeginswithus.org/teamup.
Be right there. Wait. Use the shovel and bucket of water, remember? Drown, stir, drown, feel. Then make sure it's cool.
Where'd you learn that?
SmokeyBear.com. Brushed up on some tips before we left. Don't want to start a wildfire, right?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
We are the Tennessee Volunteers. People who create connections, push boundaries, do the research that changes lives. We've got world-class academics and championship athletics. To be the best, you gotta learn from the best. And if you wanna lead, you gotta light the way. We've got what it takes. It takes a volunteer.
Welcome back to the Orange Zone. On my right is Sophie Starkey. On the left are the two Lukes. I'm Jackson Schock. And we know college football can be stressful, it can be confusing, and it can definitely be overwhelming, and we certainly feel that way. Now, to simplify this, we've taken a look at each of the next weeks for the next 4 to figure out who maybe we want to root for if we're rooting for Tennessee to make the college football playoff. With that being said, let's jump right in with Week 11. Sophie, what do we need to do here?
Yeah, so brief run through this. Michigan, Indiana. We don't play either of them, so really what we need Michigan to do is come through here to give Indiana their first loss. Good for us. We don't have to do anything, but that is our preferable scenario. Same situation with Utah. We need Utah to give BYU their first loss. Both these teams are undefeated, and going into playoffs, we don't want to see that. That's a situation we don't want to have to handle. Now we're looking at SEC play here. We actually want Georgia to win this Ole Miss game because when we play Georgia, we want them to only have that one loss. So it looks better when we upset them.
There we go.
Yes,
I like the
absolutely.
win there.
There we go.
We
like
want
the
to
win.
be their spoiler team.
I like
so when we beat Georgia, it's going to look better if they only have that one loss to Alabama, which we also beat. Now looking at Alabama, we also want them to win this game because the stronger they look, it looks better that we have beat them in the past. So also I just don't like LSU. So that's some bias there. But obviously we got Tennessee, Mississippi State. Not only should Tennessee win this one, but we should blow it out of the park. Gain that offense and that momentum going into that Georgia game. So I hope we have a really high-scoring game here. And there's your look at Week 11.
There we go. So we know if you're a fan, take a screenshot now if you need to. This is, I have no idea what channels these are going to be on, but that's the teams you want to root for. Not all these are going to happen, but if a few of them happen, that helps Tennessee's case. Let's move on to Week 12, and Week 12 is a very simple one. Tennessee needs to beat Georgia. It's that simple. There are really no other matchups that benefit the Volunteers unless something crazy happens, like a crazy upset, which we don't necessarily see happening, and it isn't necessarily a realistic possibility or a realistic hope to hope. So Tennessee needs to beat Georgia. If they don't, that's why we're doing this now. We need a little more luck to be able to push the Volunteers into the college football playoff. But very simple, win, and you're almost in. You got to finish out the rest of the season. But this would be monumental for the Volunteers if they could beat Georgia in Athens. Let's move on to Week 13. and we've got a little more variety of teams here.
We do, and this first one is going to be a fantastic game, and the Vols in this one are going to want Indiana to win the game on this one. Oh, Ohio State.
We want Ohio State.
We want Ohio State to win. Indiana is a great team. They're no losses, 9-0. They're having a phenomenal season, so it's going to be a tough one, but we're going to want the Buckeyes to pull through on this one. Army and sorry.
I was going to say now there's some confusion here. You'd think Indiana, they're undefeated, that could just be easy. But if you look at a 2-loss Ohio State team and a 2-loss Tennessee team, I think Ohio State has a stronger resume, and that bumps Tennessee down a little bit further. So an upset, or not an upset, but if Indiana loses, which shouldn't feel like an upset because it's not. But if Ohio State is able to beat Indiana, that makes Indiana a 1-loss team. Theoretically, Tennessee could be a 1-loss team. That instantly parachutes them over them because they have a stronger strength of schedule against the SEC schools that they've beaten.
I'm gonna actually
disagree.
I'm gonna disagree with you a little
go
bit on
ahead.
that one.
Disagree.
Because let's say Indiana loses this game, and Tennessee and Indiana are both 1-loss teams at the end of the season.
Yep.
They lost to Ohio State. We lost to Arkansas.
Okay.
That's a much worse loss for us. So I'm gonna combat you a little
I
bit.
I would argue. Look at the strength of schedule and the wins, though. They've beaten Alabama. They would have beaten Georgia, the number 3 team right now. I think the strength of schedule would increase the Volunteers. Regardless, you can tell who made this graphic and who put what on what. Regardless, we could argue about this forever.
Exactly.
Let's just move on to Notre Dame Army.
Move on. Notre Dame Army. Again, another good game. 2 good teams. Army coming in undefeated. That leads us to the prediction. Army, we want them to beat Notre Dame. Notre Dame, another strong team in college football right now. Again, contender for us to compete for that spot in the playoff. And we're hoping they take the cake on this one. Army does. And Tennessee UTEP. I mean,
pretty straightforward.
We don't want UTEP to win this game.
Yeah, pretty big highlight on Notre Dame here, especially when you consider the fact that a 1-loss Notre Dame team to that, not awful, but Northern Illinois was not a team that they should have lost to. Notre Dame should be undefeated right now, considering they haven't had the strongest strength of schedule at all. If you look at a 1-loss Notre Dame team that let's say they win out, Tennessee loses to Georgia, we got a 2-loss Tennessee team and a 1-loss Notre Dame team. That's going to be a tough. I guess I'll open the floor up. In my opinion, I think that they would favor a Notre Dame team because the committee always loves Notre Dame. That's number one. They're not necessarily going to want a Tennessee game in when they can get powerhouse and big fan Notre Dame in there. But I think that they would want to favor a Notre Dame team that wins out over a 2-loss Tennessee team. But I could also see that being a flip of a coin. Where do you guys lie on that?
I mean, I see the reasoning there. And I agree with you partly, but it's the same thing for me that I'm looking at with the Indiana-Ohio State game. This Army team is undefeated as of now. If they stay that way, it's hard to overpass an undefeated team, especially when we have 12 teams, not 4 teams in this playoff. So, I mean, again, that's another toss-up that could go either way, in my opinion. But this will be an interesting week in college football.
Yeah, and like I said, this is a lot of. I mean, the good
week.
news is because we have 2 different sides of this, it means either outcome happens, you could be happy about it. Right. So that's a bright 100%. Side. You guys have anything there? Or are we going to move on?
I mean, I agree with you. Strength of schedule, I think, is going to be the determining factor for half of these teams. It's going to be great if they're undefeated, but strength of schedule is what's going to push you farther than a 1-2 loss. It's who you played, how much you lost by.
I will say the one thing that's throwing me off is that if you look at the original, like the CFP top 25 rankings that just came out.
Yep.
It feels like they're, as of now this might change, but it feels like as of now they're putting a lot more weight on the better loss rather than the better win.
He's fighting.
I'm not saying that's how it should be done.
No, that's
realistic.
I'm
not saying that's what's going to happen, but that's what it feels like to me when I look at this college football 25 playoff rankings right now. It feels like they're favoring a better loss over a better win.
Sure, and we're going to see how they kind of continue to favor that or if they don't as we move on in the college football playoff rankings. The good news, as they said on the ranking show, is that this is the first week and everything could change. None of this could matter because
100%.
of all the games we're showing right now, plus some upsets that we can't even predict. So let's move on. Let's wrap up. Week 14, Luke, walk us through it.
Yeah, let's look at Texas A&M here. Let's get physical, okay? Texas A&M, we want Texas to win here. Okay, let's knock Texas A&M out of any sort of projections. We want Texas over here. But let's look at Notre Dame USC down here. We were just talking about it. Notre Dame, they have a tough couple of games here, tough last 3 couple of games. We want USC coming in right here because if USC knocks Notre Dame out, all of a sudden we got a lot of shakeups going on in these projections, guys. A lot of mixed up stuff. Notre Dame is sitting at 10 right now, I believe. Something like, I think they're at 10.
Yep.
And so USC would definitely knock them down. You know, the big one down here, guys, Tennessee Vandy.
And this is going to be a
I'm
test.
so scared.
And this is going to be a test.
Without a doubt, this is not a checkmark game at all. Okay, people are looking at this like every other year we played Vandy. You know, obviously we want Tennessee to win. No surprise there. But this is not anything that, you know, we can't look at this like past years because Vandy is a very, very solid team this year. You look at Vandy in past years, absolutely. Just check it off and move on. This is a game that we have to not worry about, but definitely play a conscious matter into because they performed well. They performed very good. You know, Pavia and the rest of the team has led the team, you know, to some upset wins. We've seen it earlier in the season. So keep your eyes out on Vandy. This is not a guaranteed game, and it's one of these things where end of the season, you know, you got a good record. They could easily take that away from you. Be vigilant. Stay vigilant.
Now, Alabama lost, and Texas struggled in Nashville. So saying Nashville is a dangerous spot is something that we never thought we'd have to say. But it is the truth, and hopefully the Volunteers can enter this game with 1 loss. Worst case scenario, hopefully 2 losses, no more than that, where something catastrophic has gone wrong. If they're able to take care of Vanderbilt, that is almost as good as you can get, considering it's a 2-loss Tennessee team. Now, that's some college football for you. It gets complicated real quick. I'm sure we'll have an update on this considering anything can happen in college football. Any other Saturday means a wide variety of things can happen. Now let's move on to our great, good, bad, ugly. Luke, why don't you lead us off?
Yeah, let's look at great here. I mean, this is a fantastic play. We can look at UCF, and they're up 30 on Arizona right now. But let's take a look at this play because it's truly one that you don't see very often. End of the first half, they're up 28 points, I believe, 29. And if we get it up on the prompter right now, maybe we won't. But I'll tell you what happens. This guy right here for UCF, he's taking pressure from the middle. And I'll tell you what, he launches a Hail Mary from the 50-yard line. They connect in the end zone. And my goodness, they're up 36 now. So really amazing performance. Hail Mary, I wish you could see it. I don't think we're looking at it right now. But a beautiful performance, a beautiful pass from UCF.
The celebration was good, too.
Why don't you show us the celebration? We're not able to see the clip. Why don't you show us the celebration? Reenact what happened.
Yeah, so they're up 28. Mind you, it's the end of the first half. And sure, it's an exciting play, but the celebration was a bit excessive. So he's running. He's full-on sprinting. He's sprinting. He takes off the helmet, and he's running around like he just won the Super Bowl. And so it's
a win is a win.
It's a win.
Well, that wasn't a win. I think the thing is that wasn't a win. It was the entrance to the second half.
Exactly. The game is not over.
And so I'm sure they were very happy in that locker room. But without a doubt, great play there by
All right, well, let's move on to good. And if we don't have clips, this may be a little difficult. So if we don't get a clip here, talk us through what happened.
Yeah, absolutely. So Oklahoma, we know we played them. They've had a rough kind of season so far. They've been rotating that quarterback room. Jackson Arnold has definitely had some rough moments this season. He was due a little bit of a victory for himself and for his team. So second half, he's kind of running on the end zone he doesn't want to be in, and then he scrambles out of the pocket, throws this Mahomes-like pass for 50 yards. Don't hate on Mahomes,
Little
all right?
Mahomie.
Respect on his name. There's this Mahomes-like pass for 50 yards that does get run in for a touchdown, and that was definitely a little bit of a turning point in this game for them as they went on to win 59-14. So now that we don't play them anymore, go Oklahoma. They were due that little victory.
Helps the resume.
Absolutely.
That helps the resume.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a pen on you? No pen?
I do.
All right, let me see a pen. Let's draw. Toby, you want to zoom in here? We're going to draw the play for you. Hold this.
Oh, okay.
Toby, zoom on in.
Getting creative.
Come here.
Getting feisty.
Let me turn around. I'm going to use you as a
wow.
Use the back.
So here's the play. The line of scrimmage.
That's what they're saying.
The line of scrimmage is here, right?
Wow.
Here's the line of scrimmage, and the end zone is about here. Let's see if we can get a focus in there. It's difficult. There we go. Boom.
Aren't I so muscular?
Line of scrimmage right here. Oh, zoom it back in. There. Oh, nope.
Whoa.
Down.
Whoa.
Yes. Stay right there. Quarterback, Jackson Arnold, right here. He's got a receiver on the outside. We are in the end zone here, right here. End zone. Not a good place to be starting your drive. He ends up rolling outside, and this receiver's just on a mission. Gets the rollout toss into the end zone, almost a 100-yard play. And if you look at that right there, you can't tell me that that's just not winning football.
That's a beautiful
That's
play.
winning football right there.
Right there.
Winning
Jackson.
football.
Can I frame that?
Yep.
Can you sign that? And
There you
I frame
go.
that?
Hang on.
At auction.
Thank
Now,
you.
I believe I have another.
Thank
There it is.
Thank you
if you'd
so
like.
much.
That's
for
the
this.
play, and actually I need that card, I'm not
Oh,
going to lie,
never
because
mind.
my notes are on here. Now let's zoom everything back out if we can try and figure this out. We're on camera 2 now. Okay, now for my, what did I do with my clip?
You gave it to
switch
me.
me. All right, bad. We've got Aubie the Tiger here, and this is his second appearance, which I think is fitting for the Auburn Tigers this season. They've had an awful season, and this game kind of shows it. The average amount of punts for a football team is around 2 or 3 a game. Ish, maybe 4 if you've got a defensive battle, something along those lines. The worst team that punts the most is Tulsa. They punt 6.6 times a game. Round up, that's 7 punts a game. That's a lot of punts. This game between Auburn and Vanderbilt featured 14 punts. 6 for Auburn, 8 for Vanderbilt. That is absurd. The record was 5 punts in a row by Vanderbilt.
It's the most
drive
action
punt,
those guys
drive
have seen.
punt, drive punt by the same team. Vanderbilt punted 6 times.
Wow.
That is absurd. 6 and 8. Now you understand. 14 punts. Think about how many punts that is. That's a full drive, and then it's like, all right, we didn't get there. Boom, 16 times. That's absurd.
The score for that is really remarkable.
I know.
too.
It was Vanderbilt
dude.
punt 8 times and still win the game.
It was ugly. It was they punted 8 times and won. That's how bad Auburn is. That's why our friend Aubie is back in bad. And then this play, good luck explaining the ugly and explaining why Mr. Lafayette is here.
His name Marquise Lafayette.
Marquis de Lafayette.
Marquis de Lafayette.
French, not Marquise.
And he's up there because we're going to talk about the Lafayette college football team here. They are not an FBS team. They're an FCS team, which is why I really wish we had this clip. But this
is impossible. That play.
In this game against Bucknell, they just had this past week. You saw them. They were driving down the field. There was a minute and a half left in the game. They drove all the way down inside the red zone for a game-tying drive. If they would have scored, it would have been game-tying, sent into overtime.
Yep.
Minute and a half left. Quarterback rolls out of the pocket, avoids a sack by throwing it to his lineman, which is at the line of scrimmage. Lineman gets the ball, acts like he's never seen a football before, and plays hot potato, rolls it to the defense for a fumble, turning the ball over and losing the game for Lafayette. Really wild clip because
we'll add it in post.
We'll add it in post,
and it wasn't a drop.
It was a roll. Yeah. He rolled the ball to the defense. Looked like he was playing backyard football and was scared to get tackled or something. It was not a good day for the Lafayette lineman in that clip, but I mean, it's a funny clip if we add it in post.
I don't know how you found that either. It's a very interesting, specific game.
You don't follow FCS football?
Very research worthy.
I don't.
He did some digging.
I was like,
am
I supposed
to?
Too many D1 teams. Okay, well, that's a fun wrap up. We've got our winning football card here. I'll give that
Thank
to you
you
as
so
you
much.
asked for it earlier. Well, that wraps up the Orange Zone. Sorry we had no clips in the second half. We'll add them in post. If you were watching live, big thank you because you stuck through whatever that just was. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy the homecoming this weekend. Hopefully we can beat Mississippi State. If we don't, we're just not going to show up next week. And we'll see you right back here next week. Peace!